Welcome to the bold analysis, ladies and gentlemen. I'm still shooting this analysis back home, the very last videos before I go back to Nairobi. But I've just got a very interesting story here I want us to look at. When Raila Odinga met the Azimio members of parliament, he actually issued them directions. And one of the demands he put to them is that they stop talking or rather commenting about the current dialogue framework, the bipartisan framework that has been put in public without a clear knowledge, and in actually demanding that everything that should be said should come from him. In fact, himself is supposed to make a comment. And Raila Odinga is getting wary and is saying that because the MPs decided to put him a task asking him that how are they supposed to be quiet while their Kenya Kwanza counterparts are already running with damaging narratives. And Raila Odinga assured the members of parliament that let William Ruto himself speak about the matter, and they should not respond to those he called their attack dogs. People who just speak just to try and just try to comment their personal opinions about this matter. And Raila is putting the Azimio members of parliament on alert that don't respond to Rigathi Gachagua, don't respond to Kimani Ichung'wah, don't respond to these other young politicians, because William Ruto himself has not said no to what is going on, and let's wait for what William Ruto is going to say. Now, from the multiple sources we've also received is that even William Samoei Ruto has had an attempt to try to speak, or rather has also given orders to the members of parliament that are in the bipartisan approach to tame their lips in commenting about the discussion going on that bipartisan framework, because it's actually saying that it's not doing better. So it's also demanding that those who speak, even those who are going to the panel interviews, are supposed to speak from points of knowledge, that they're not just going to speak to dilute the intensity of that conversation, or rather what that conversation is all set about. Now, what is bringing all this is a framework that Raila Odinga has proposed on the 2008 National Government Accord that allegedly pushed for the handshake, or rather the nusu mkate then, that was in 2008. And he's saying that in their political discussion going forward, they must embrace the discussion of solving winner takes all. Winner takes all is what the BBI was supposed to cure, but selfishly we did not listen to it. And he's saying that time is ripe for them to have a stab, or rather to have a review of our 2010 constitution to cure what he calls winner takes all. And then, so as this discussion is going on, there are those who have taken it to the political altar to injure it and to dent and to say all manner of things about winner takes all, which I believe that some of these people that are making their observations, that they're making their comments, they're making their comments because they just want to impress the bosses, not that they're making comments from the points of knowledge. And I support, and in fact, in this analysis, I want to call on President William Ruto that if you mean well for ceasefire, if you mean well for the peace, then what you need to do, you need to keep the attack dogs quiet. You need to make sure that your guns are down. In a rural setup here, ukitembea na upanga kwa mkono, when you're carrying a panga, you'll always be urged to carry it in the left. Because when you're holding it in your right, with your right hand, you mean violence, or you mean you are ready for war. So that's what is going on. For the country to take the bipartisan approach very honest, and for it to yield the fruits, it must and it should be about making sure that people do not make the reckless statements. because that do not add the voice. That does not show the seriousness. And I know that many are just using it because there are those who are pushing personal political agenda, personal political narratives. Now, these fellas should not be allowed to use the other platforms to do their politics, because that's not what is going to help the situation. Now, why do you think Ruto must stop them? I just have 3 simple reasons why this is very important. Before you look at that, I want to humbly request you to subscribe to our channel, click the notification bell and like our video. Thank you very much for those who are supporting us from every part of the country. I want to categorically shout out to Milka, Anyango, and is it Maggie? Yes, I think Waithera, for I received your sandwiches. Asanteni sana. Yeah, and those who are saying, yeah, I have now bought that fertilizer by the way. Asanteni sana. Shout out and may God bless you. May you really never lack. Now, we need to be very sensitive, because William Ruto is getting wary that probably within the presidential circle, within the executive circle, there are those who are receiving intelligence leaks. There are some intelligence leaks that are some classified information. Maybe they are not supposed to go to the country, but there is a well choreographed political strategy by those around William Ruto themselves, using information from the intelligence to craft political narratives against Raila Odinga. Now, this is what is happening. I know for sure that for the last 2 weeks that Raila Odinga had been calling for that mass action, what has been happening is that the tide was changing. Now, when the tide changes, there are those who feel insecure, especially the UDA politicians from the mountain. When they see Raila Odinga getting traction, most of them get insecure because they feel that, okay, so it seems William Ruto gonna listen. So what they will always try to do is they will always go around William Ruto and tell William Ruto, leave us Raila Odinga to deal with Raila Odinga. It's not about even dealing with Raila. It is about trying to manage the political narratives. Now, what they are actually doing is just to please William Ruto that we are doing it. And so with this, we find a lot of narratives in the public until you even know what exactly is at stake. Now, some of them, many of them, if not all of them, are actually making narratives just based on propaganda, where they should be speaking from a point of knowledge. So that bit is coming out. But I want to say something. You know, Kenyans are not bad people. I just said the other day, when Raila called for mass action, Monday and Thursday, Kenyans are very bitter and people are very angry and people are politically charged. But the next day, as in on Thursday, you don't see anyone to town. But the next day on Friday, everyone is back to normal. So it makes you know one thing, that the Kenyan people are very peaceful and peace-loving people and are really unified. But when it comes to when politicians come in the middle, that's when the soup normally becomes very sour. So what's happening? Today, I think I've read a story where Gachagua is daring Raila to call mass protest. So I'm wondering, do you think you are talking to Raila Odinga or you are talking to Raila Odinga supporters? You know, some of these people are very reckless because what they do is they tend to think as if they're talking to Raila. Well, that's not it. Raila is just one person. This article is in all this newspaper, in the headlines, or even the news, in the YouTube, and everywhere. How many other Kenyans are receiving that information? If you want to dare Raila Odinga not to call a press brief, not to call a mass action, then why don't you just do him a text, if that's it, instead of killing Kenyans? Because that is it. No one should, and President Ruto should tell these people, you should not create a perception that we have boxed Raila. As in, you should not create a perception that in Azimio la Umoja, we are dealing with Raila. Now, when you create that perception, that's where Raila thrives. And even the supporters will not want that situation. Sorry to say this. There are some people that went to the street, and when you could tell them, wanaweza kuambia bwana, Gachagua alikuwa amedharau Raila sana. Sasa, mali imefika, Imebidi bwana. Hii madhara ilikuwa imeenda sana. That was enough to motivate some people to go to the street. So when you dare people, you make it look like it is something that was illegal, it is something that was bad. And so with that, you're even charging the masses. These politicians that are over speaking and spitting very bitter venom are actually charging the masses. They are not doing any good to help the situation. They're not helping the situation. In fact, some of them are just playing political narratives, which are not going to help. The number 3, I think there are internal interests. There are national interests that must supersede individual interests. The politicians around William Ruto are pursuing individual interests. They're pursuing individual interests. None of them that you're seeing is pursuing a national interest. So when you leave them to talk, they'll speak the individual politics. They're not going to speak the national discourse. And that is why I believe the national discourse can only be driven by 2 people, Raila Odinga or William Ruto or Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo Musyoka, the Martha Karua. All the other young politicians there, the other young politicians that are coming, that are speaking about regions. How can someone speaking about the national politics while he's a person that believes his thinking starts and ends with Mount Kenya? How does that person take that? So I believe if Ruto wants the national discourse, then you must discard those who push regional or individual interests. That's my take.